Hey y'all, how's it going?
How are you?
Good. I still have some students in the room, so I'm gonna leave my mask on.
I'm amazed at your capacity to maintain focus and composure when you describe all of the things that are happening in front of you.
Well, we always level up when we don't have any other choice, right? So
I guess that is a possibility.
sink or swim, I guess. I was amazed though. Yesterday, I had a meeting that was an all-day meeting in Richmond, and so I put in for a sub, and I was shocked because a sub actually took the job. And subs don't normally take my job because I'm a reading specialist, and they get very intimidated by that. But also, we just don't have subs this year. Like there are so few. So when I saw a sub took my job, I was so excited because it never happens.
I heard that on NPR there was a big thing about the shortage of subs across the country. Yep.
Yeah, and the city just raised their sub pay to $20 an hour. So if the county doesn't raise theirs to $20 an hour, then it's going to get even worse. Right now, ours is about $13.25 an hour.
You know, if the school board's considering it as part of the, the year-end ARPA/tax windfall.
I'm not sure. They did not discuss it at the last meeting, which really surprised me. I thought that they would, so I'm hoping that they have that idea soon. Yeah.
Lisa heard from a number of folks who aren't going to be able to join us.
Okay.
So I think this could be it. Is that your understanding, Lisa?
I also have to go pick up my son at 4 o'clock. So sometimes I can get my husband to do it, but he's not available today.
So what do you guys think about whether we should prioritize the adoption presentation with Jamie and Kayla so that at least 3 of you can hear it, or postpone the adoption presentation to December and try to see if more folks will appear for that and make it your call.
I mean, I feel bad because it's adoption month, right? And so it's kind of like a timely message for us to have, but I also wish that more of the board could hear it. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm fine if we postpone it until December, but I also, Amy, how are you feeling about that?
Well, I'd like to just make 2 suggestions about what I read today, but I think it's a difficult time, and I have a feeling in December I'm going to have to leave at 4 o'clock again. I just, so I think we should go ahead with the presentation, to be honest, because the staff members are here and I don't want to make them show up twice.
Is it possible to share the link to the recording, specifically like to email that to the rest of the board and then they can watch it?
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's make sure we do that then intentionally so that they could at least watch the presentation. And so we can move the adoption presentation just to the very beginning, if that's okay with you guys. All right, cool.
So Kayla and Jamie have joined us this evening to talk about adoption and our process. And so we have 3 board members, advisory board members with us tonight, and then we will send the recorded link. Well, obviously it gets posted online, and then also we'll send it out to the folks who were unable to be here. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you guys for having us. I am gonna share the screen, and I'm a little rusty with doing that on Zoom, I'm not gonna lie. But I think I know how, and Jamie's actually gonna, and of course I've got 2 screens, but I'm Kayla Morris. I'm one of the senior foster care and adoption workers for the agency, and primarily focus on adoption work and post-adoption work, which we're going to talk about those today. But I'm going to let Jamie kick us off. Are you guys able to see the slideshow?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to start this, and I'm going to I don't know how to do it without the notes, so sorry that those are there. But I'll let Janie go ahead and get us started.
Hi, I'm Janie Hunter, and I have the distinction of being the longest worker in adoption, and maybe in the agency. So I got the distinction of leading this off, and I'll say I'm disappointed Karen couldn't be here, Karen Horridge, because Karen was a counterpart in the city for many years, and we worked together. So she knows adoption from experience. So we have an adoption team, and it's led by Amy Casey, who's our supervisor. And it includes Kayla, who's with us, Kayla Morris, who's a senior worker, and Amanda Hodgson, who's also a senior worker, and myself. We meet and discuss issues and planning with adoption, but we involve all of our foster care and adoption workers in adoption because each of the foster care workers has kids that will be moving toward adoption. And each worker has a purple binder that Amy was instrumental in putting together to provide guidance to all our workers about the process and the forms and that sort of thing. And I've got to say that Amy and Kayla were the main drivers in putting together this slideshow for you guys, the PowerPoint. So I want to specifically acknowledge Amy, who is a large part behind this, the slideshow, the PowerPoint, but she's not able to be here because of an FPM, Family Partnership Meeting, which I'm assuming you guys may know about that part of our process. So I think one of the things we want to emphasize is that adoption is a journey. It's a lifelong journey. And for us, it starts with kids that come into foster care who can't return home. And their goal then subsequently becomes adoption. I think an important part is that it's rooted initially in loss because it involves children that are not able to grow up in their birth families, generally speaking. And so they're being adopted by people other than the people that they were born to. So I guess the point is that we celebrate adoption and we appreciate the families that come forward to be a part of adopting children and helping them out of foster care. But what they're really doing is joining a journey with the child that involves loss and sadness. And so it's really important that families understand that and recognize that it's not something that's sort of one and done. It's a process that continues with the child as they grow up and also into adulthood. So I think that's good for that slide, Kayla.
Sorry, hopefully you guys are. Sorry, I'm struggling with this. Are you seeing the road to adoption now? Okay.
Yes.
So the road to adoption, basically, how we get there is, if we're working with a child that's at a point of being adopted, that means that they've been in foster care and they have been determined to be unable to safely be reunited with their birth families. And essentially their birth parents' rights have been terminated. And we terminate the birth parents' rights either through an involuntary termination or voluntary through a permanent entrustment. It's a it's a long court process. Sometimes there are numerous appeals at different levels. When we get to our barrier section, we're going to talk about how that can be a real barrier to getting these achieved timely. We do make every attempt to place siblings together in adoptive homes, but we're not always able to do that. A lot of times with these cases, we are stuck with really difficult decisions about how, whether siblings should be placed together or whether we may need to separate them, particularly when we have to look at like specialized recruitment, which we're going to talk about a little later, and whether we may be able to recruit or have better success finding a family for a child if we separate a sibling group. So those are just some of the challenges that we face. Sorry, I can't get it to change slides for some reason. There we go. Did it change for you guys?
No.
Oh, my screen sharing is paused for some reason. I don't know why. Let's see. Anybody a Zoom expert that might know why it paused my screen sharing?
Is there a drop down menu on the top where it says view options?
It says I can stop share.
Or along the menu bar at the bottom?
Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Resume share. Here we go. Can you see?
We can see your screen now and we can see your cursor moving, so it's not paused anymore.
But it's still not on the right slide.
I think he's.
All right, I'm just gonna stop. Sorry.
Kayla, I had to stop screen sharing and restart screen sharing 3 times this morning during the new employee orientation. So I feel your pains.
That's what I just did. Let's see if that helps. Doesn't look like that's helping. Technology is so fun, isn't it? Let me see. I'm going to try see if I stop the dual monitor. Maybe the dual monitor is confusing it. Let me see. Okay, do you see my screen now?
Yes. And I think it's on the right screen.
Sorry, guys. Okay, we're just going to do it this way. Now, can you see some statistics?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Back on track. So Amy did a nice job of gathering some statistics for us regarding the amount of children that are in the Virginia foster care system. And, notably, we really want to highlight the amount of children that we have in our custody right now. Right now we have 91 children that are in foster care in Albemarle County Department of Social Services. And out of those 91, 36 of them have a primary permanency goal of adoption, and 10 of them have a concurrent goal of adoption, meaning that we're working a primary goal of relative placement and a concurrent goal of adoption. Percentage wise, if you count the 10 with the concurrent goal of adoption, you're looking at roughly 50% of cases that have some type of identified goal of adoption. And that is pretty disproportionate with the amount of workers that we have to do this work. So definitely wanted to highlight that. But despite that, our little program continues to work diligently, even through the challenges of the pandemic. Last year, even with the tight COVID restrictions, we finalized 22 adoptions. That was myself, Janie, and Amanda. Currently this year, we've finalized 6, and we have another 4 that are due to be finalized by the end of the year. Just this year, of the 10 that we adopted, the 10 that are going to be adopted by the end of the year, 4 are being adopted by a blood relative through kinship foster care, which is a pretty good number. It's a lot higher than the state average. And last year, I don't have the exact percentage for 2020 as far as the kinship adoptions, but I do know that it was even higher than this year. And our children who were not able to safely place with kinship or fictive kinship adopted placements are adopted within foster family homes. And we do a nice job of usually being able to keep children in the foster home that they're in throughout the life of their foster care case. So typically a child in our custody is adopted by the foster parents that fostered them throughout the life of the case. They're not having to move in order to be adopted. Janie, I think this one's yours.
Yeah, so we recognize that children are best parented in families, and that foster care is basically parenting by committee in some ways, because the agency's legal guardian, and we delegate responsibility to the child placing agency and the foster parents, but in many ways decisions are made sort of by a team. And that's not the easiest way for a child to grow up. And there's also the uncertainty of the future. So it's really in the child's best interest to reach permanency and with the goal of adoption as quickly as possible. The federal benchmark is 24 months after entering foster care. But this is actually a rather challenging time frame because we need to primarily we work toward the goal of return home, and so that needs to be ruled out, and we need to then terminate parental rights, and that's a process that can take a significant amount of time. The juvenile court is the first court for deciding about termination of parental rights, but the parents have an automatic right of appeal to the circuit court. So many of our parents do appeal, not all, but many appeal to the circuit court. And there's a delay in getting the case into the circuit court, and it's presented from the beginning again in the circuit court. Parents also then have a right to appeal to the Virginia Court of Appeals, and that takes an even longer period of time and can be very cumbersome and is a significant delay in the process of moving a child toward permanency through adoption. As Kayla mentioned, she and I actually primarily carry the adoption cases and are sort of the adoption specialist, but all of our workers need to carry cases that have the goal of adoption because close on to 50% of our kids have the goal of adoption. So as I mentioned, we're working to train all those workers and keep them up to date on policy changes, but we're also sometimes pairing workers, Kayla and myself, with workers who are new to the adoption process to help them in managing some of the issues involved with the adoption process. In fact, we're in the process, for example, in terms of policy changes. The state has really been looking at adoption policy and, quite honestly, specifically adoption assistance, because all of the kids that are adopted are eligible for up to the financial support that they receive in foster care. And so part of our adoption process involves determining the child's needs and negotiating with the family regarding the support that they will receive in adoption. And this is more and more so overseen by the state. So we have a state representative who's called a negotiator who processes the work that we're doing and approves that it is following policy. So that's a little bit of another delay because we need to submit much of our work to the negotiator to have approval on the work that we've done. We also need to take into consideration the clinical needs of the children. Some of the children have, most all of the children have experienced trauma. They've all experienced loss, and they have special needs from the path that has brought them into foster care. As Kayla mentioned, some of our children come in as sibling groups, and it can be challenging to place them together and to decide if that's in their best interest. Generally, the general rule of thumb is that it is in their best interest to be placed together, but occasionally that's not the case. And so we do currently have 3 young people who are in a foster family that is not prepared to adopt them. And so this is a particularly challenging situation when we need to recruit adoptive parents for kids in care. And honestly, these kids are often the kids that have been in care the longest. They're the kids that have had potentially more placements in foster care, and they may have more special needs as a result. And those are probably the most challenging cases for us. But those are all the things that can hold us up in reaching a 2-year or 24-month timeline. And so it is very challenging, and it's challenging for all of the agencies around the state, but that's what we're working toward. So as we mentioned, adoption starts with loss and involves grief and guilt. But there is the promise of hope and joy and the connection to a new family. So we at times talk about kids having 2 families, the family that they were born to and the family that is raising them. And we try to help support those connections and to help the adoptive parents understand that just because the rights of those parents are terminated doesn't mean that those children have forgotten the parents that they were born to, and that they can be still important people in their life, even though they're not present. So let me set this up. This is an adoption that was done in July of a young fellow named Chance. He came into care with his older brother, but he also has, older half brother. He has also 2 half siblings that are within his birth family, extended birth family. None of the children are being raised by their mother. So what you see on the slide here is in the Circuit Court of Albemarle County. We encourage our families to finalize the adoptions in a court hearing because it helps to punctuate the finalization and the conclusion of this process. and to celebrate that they are no longer in foster care, that they are now permanently a member of a new family. And our court, because it's a historic building, has a rope that's tied to a bell above the courthouse. And currently, this bell is only rung for adoptions. And so if you ever are downtown and you hear the bell ringing, that means that a child has been adopted. And the judge generally allows, with the parents' help, because it can be kind of challenging to pull the bell, as you will see, allows the child to ring the bell as many times as they are old, and then sometimes one extra for good luck, or, for extra. So oftentimes the whole family comes over to help in pulling the rope to ring the bell. So this is a video of Chance and his family. If you want to run that, Kale, I can tell some more after we've seen it. So you may not have been able to hear, but at one point he says, "Today is my adoption day, yay." But this is a blended family. The mom came into the marriage with a child, and that's the oldest child. And then they were married and adopted one African-American child, and then the second, who is Chance. And then they conceived and had a child together. So they now have 4 children, none of whom are full siblings other by birth. They're full siblings through adoption. But it does highlight that one of the aspects of adoption is matching kids to families. And oftentimes we are involved in transracial adoptions, and we really encourage our families and talk with them about being sensitive to recognizing and supporting the child's racial and cultural identity. And that's a part of the process and the training involved in adopting.
Love that video, Janie. So that video is a nice segue into the post-adoption world. So once an adoption is finalized, the family's case does move over to our post-adoption caseload, which is also primarily managed by Janie and I. This slide references the one full-time post-adoption family specialist, that's me, and one part-time post-adoption family specialist, that's Janie. We currently manage about 89 cases, and what post-adoption looks like is it's a lot less hands-on than all of our other mandated case programs. But essentially we provide support to families once the adoption's finalized. As Janie pointed out, adoption is a joyous celebration, but it's also has a lot of other emotions wrapped up in it. And so essentially we're available to assist families with the unique challenges that come up after the adoption. And, that can be 6 months down the road. It can be a couple of years down the road. We work with the families up to the point that the child turns 18, and sometimes even up until 21. if they're approved for continued support after the age of 18. And so we continue to work with them if at varying degrees, depending on what they need. There's no requirement as far as our contact. Sometimes we don't have, hardly any contact. It's just a once a year annual affidavit that we ask families to fill out for us, so we can keep their information current. And then other times, if the case is in crisis, the contact is very frequent. In my experience during the pandemic, my post-adoption caseload was very active because families were losing their service providers because services weren't being offered in person. And, that was a big challenge for families who have adopted children with special needs. And so that presented with a lot of challenges. It has, leveled out a little since things have gone back to in person. But essentially, these things come up throughout the different developmental stages of child's life, and we are here for families should they need support. And, that support includes different types of services. Sometimes it's just, referring them out. Sometimes it's just providing them some education. Sometimes we can connect them to respite. Sometimes it's just, getting them in with like support groups. There's lots of different supports that we can provide through post-adoption. This is just a nice quote that we wanted to share from the adoptee's perspective. And it's sort of a nice reminder regarding what Janie pointed out earlier about how these children are often parented by teams of professionals, and an important reminder to, ensure that we're getting input from the children regarding their needs and wishes. So another part of post-adoption, and one of the things that I do is our disclosures. And so, children they're curious, they want to know their story, they want to know what happened to them. And so when we work with adoptive families, we always encourage openness and honesty around adoption. We always ask adoption. I always encourage adoptive parents to tell children their story. And so we hope that children know their story all along, but there's oftentimes, details and nuances that they may not be aware of. And so I do what's called our disclosures. And so what that is when an adoptee that was adopted from Virginia DSS becomes an adult, they can request their record from the state. And we receive those requests from the state, and it's our job to explore what contact, if any, the birth family is willing to have, what information they're willing to have shared. And essentially we determine whether we're able to connect the birth family to the adoptee to have contact. Birth parents are also able to do disclosures, so they can reach out and see if we can put them in contact with the adoptee. And so everything is done with confidentiality in mind. It's done, it's only done for adults. And so everybody has to be, consenting to the information being disclosed. And so it's a big job. A part of that job is also unpacking a lot of it with the adoptee. So the most recent one that I did was with an adult adoptee, and it was really, working with him around what was he trying to explore, what was he hoping to find, and, what did he want to do with this information? And then also, helping people to deal with the outcome if the person on the other side doesn't want to meet them. So, helping them understand that it's not rejection or a reflection of anything that they did. And, also understanding, helping the adoptive parent understand that, it's not something that they did wrong that is causing this adoptee to seek this information. It's really just the adoptee wanting to know where they came from, something as simple as where they got their eye color. And so I think, the importance of this is that we work all angles of these cases. We work with the adoptee, we work with the birth parents, we work with the adoptive parents, to really explore all different parameters of this. So I already talked about this and forgot to switch the slide. But yeah, all the records are preserved by Virginia DSS. And there's a process by which the adult adoptees and the birth parents have to go through in order to obtain their records.
There's one thing I want to add, and this isn't on our slide, but we've really focused on kind of the clinical path in adoption. And one other aspect of it, which I think is the more tedious aspect of it for workers, is the financial piece and the negotiating for what the support will be in the adoptive parents' raising of the child. And so that's another aspect that we need to manage, is negotiating what that financial support will be. And then in post-adoption, we monitor every month the checks that go out to our adoptive families. For the 89 adoptive families, we're monitoring those checks and occasionally getting calls when they don't get their checks, or then as Kayla mentioned, when they need services and we need to renegotiate, helping to fund potentially those services if that's something that needs to happen. And that's kind of the more tedious aspect of the work that we do. But it is a lifelong journey for the children and for the families who bring into their lives the story of a child that was not born to them, that becomes their story. And oftentimes the family that the child was born to sort of comes with the child and is someone, and are people that the adoptive family grow to embrace as well. So this is the ideal situation where instead of subtracting, we're adding on, and we're adding relationships when in fact the birth parents are not the ones who can do the actual work to raise the child. So that's the main thrust. And at this point, I think we want to let you know that is National Adoption Month for November.
We also want to show you another clip if we can, of these kiddos that Janie's working with. Janie, I don't know if you want to share some background on them.
Yeah, so I mean, this is actually a case where I'm partnering with the worker who is carrying this case, who has really had some very difficult adoption cases as a relatively new foster care worker. And I have to give credit to Carly Fisher, who's handled some very difficult situations. And this is one where I'm partnering with her. Jordan and Drew are the older two kids of a 5-sibling group. The The younger 3 children, we have adoptive families for. They're being adopted by their foster parents. But Jordan and Drew are not going to be adopted by the family that they're currently with. And we've put together a team with a grant-funded organization from the state, from VDSS, to help us recruit specifically for these 2 boys. And so an organization called Virginia Kids Belong has helped us, and they've done a video of the boys, which is posted online, and any of you can go on and see it, and you can learn more about adopting through this website. But we do want to share with you this little video of the 2 boys that was done in October. Kayla, are you able to put that on?
Probably have to stop sharing your screen and reshare. Like you have to, it'll show up as a different screen. It's easiest to just stop share and reshare.
So stop share.
And then have the video up on your screen and then reshare. So it shows the video. It's the easiest way to explain it.
This stuff is so fun.
I know.
All right, I've got the video up. Now I'm gonna.
And there's a little optimized sound button too before you share. Do you see that little button? If not, don't worry about it. We won't have sound, but that's okay.
No, you need the sound.
Okay. So when you're on you have the block and you pick where you pick which screen.
Oh, optimize for video clip. Okay.
There's one next to it that says something about sound.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully this works. You see the video now?
Yes.
Pretty much they had to like buy like appropriate food for kids, and they're gonna have to like, and they have to like pretty much like not be treated like they're the kids' butlers.
It'd be nice if they had like a dog's, not really a specific type of dog, just any type of dog. And kids like near my age, just like near it.
Yep.
Not necessarily
And
over or under, just near my age.
And they play like online games.
Just my perfect birthday would have balloons, a cake, and people there.
Laser tag. Pretty much my teacher and my classmates and the people that I love. He pretty much, the way when he used to like always shows me funny things and lots, and when he shows me about him beating every single song in the game,
Making everybody laugh, including me.
Jordan used to make up his own knock knock joke called knock knock, and I'm like, who's there? He's like, knock knock, and I'm like, knock knock who? He was like, knock knock, I'll knock you out. And I'm like, you got me good there.
Who's gonna laugh first?
My name is Jordan and I am 13 years old.
My name is Drew and I'm 10 years old.
So thank you all for allowing us to present. We appreciate that, and we're open to answering any questions.
Thanks for hanging in there for all those technical difficulties.
Thank you.
Totally worth
I've
it.
been looking forward to this presentation, and also the I'm trying to keep my eye out for any like National Adoption Month, not ads, I guess, but publicity things or info, stuff like that. Do we have stuff like that running this month in the newspaper or on TV?
So I'm a part of a group that partners with the City Department of Social Services, People Places, DePaul Community Resources, and CAF, Community Attention Foster Families. And together, we in the past have done a lot of that. COVID has really shut us down a bit. We used to hold a luncheon for adoptive families on Adoption Day each November, and we would celebrate the adoptive families. And last year we created a virtual luncheon kind of arrangement, and only one family attended. So it's been discouraging. Honestly, I think we haven't paid as much attention to getting video clips and things out locally. And so maybe we would still have time to do that, because I think they are available from the state, and we could connect with our local channels to see if they would run them as PSAs. I think we've dropped the ball a little bit on that this year due to COVID.
I mean, you only have 100 balls in the air right now, so I think this one is probably okay, but I'm sure you'll pick it up again when you have the capacity to do that. So,
and maybe we can still pull it off this year. We have taken advantage of a program through Jockey that offers backpacks. And so we've ordered backpacks for all of our families with the city and Albemarle to give each child who's been adopted this year a backpack with their initials on it that contains a bear and a fleecy blanket. And then there's one backpack also, or like a pouch thing for the parents that includes the book Behind the Mask and some literature about adoption. So we are getting those out to our families this month to recognize their adoptions this year.
cool. Emily, did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but yeah, I was very much looking forward to this presentation too. And yeah, I just want to thank y'all for all the work. I know it's challenging anyway, but especially all that COVID's brought. So yeah, thank you.
And
Thanks.
I made one note about the 24-month timeline because it sounds so long, but then I'm sure it just also flies by. When a child is in foster, is initially put into foster care and that timeline starts, does it restart the clock, or does it add any extra time if they change to a different foster placement? Because I feel like that almost like works against them to have to move to a foster placement because, the timeline just continues.
The timeline continues. We can request extensions, and we often do. But they do have to be placed in their adoptive home for 6 months before we can finalize their adoption. But no, the timeline doesn't ever restart. It is what it is, and it is short, and it's actually getting shorter. I mean, we're at a point now where we actually only have 15 months, and we have to justify why we haven't terminated parental rights if we're not at a point of returning the child home. So,
And honestly, as I say,
Okay.
there's a concern that if there's the potential to return children to their parents, we want to give the parents the opportunity, and sometimes the judge makes that decision, to grant the parents additional time if they're showing that they're making progress. Because termination is painful for everybody involved.
Yeah. Well, I guess I hadn't considered in my mind that there would be people that would become foster parents with the explicit intent of ending to adopt children. I just didn't know a lot about it. And I always thought, oh, foster parents, they just go into it knowing this is temporary. It's only going to be temporary. And maybe for some people that is, and for some people they think, no, I'm going to become a foster parent as the step towards adoption. But like, what would be the percentage you would say between foster parent, like what percentage of them are doing it with the intent of adopting versus just thinking it's temporary?
I would say almost all of them are dual approved, meaning they're approved to foster and adopt, but they are trained that the primary goal when you're fostering is return home. So they are trained and developed that the goal is that this child will return to its birth family, but they are open to adopting. But the one thing I will say is that we do a lot of family finding, and that's why we have such high kinship numbers, is that we do a lot of family finding and we place a lot of kids with family from the beginning. And then that's when they end up being adopted by family as well. And so, but I would say the majority of them are duly approved. We do have some that are like not interested in adopting at all. But I feel like those are have been pretty rare in my experience. Janie's experience may be different, but for me, it's pretty rare that they're not open to adoption.
Our hope would be that their first foster placement is their last foster placement. And if they need to move toward adopting, that they can be adopted with the people that have parented them. And that's not always the case. And a long time ago, we totally separated foster parents from adoptive parents, and they weren't allowed to adopt for that very reason. But I think there's been a realization that moving a child takes an emotional toll. And so it's much preferable if we can, if it's a good match, to keep the child in the home where they've been parented.
And if we were gonna post about this or talk to friends or just try to bring awareness in the community about National Adoption Month, should we direct them to that website that was on one of the previous slides? Or like if we're talking to people and we're talking about adoption and they want more information, what's a reliable source for just the average person to find that rather than just Googling and choosing randomly?
Adopt US Kids is another site, and Virginia posts our kids that are available for adoption on that site. We're mandated when a child the parental rights are terminated, we're mandated to register them with a program called AREVA that's managed by the state, and to send information so that the child can be placed on adoptuskids.org. And then, of course, the Virginia Kids Belong. In the adoption process, we tend to bring the kids, and our placing agencies tend to bring the families. So that would be Community Attention Foster Families, People Places, DePaul's. There are a lot of wonderful agencies that will work with families to help them sort through what's right for them. And they're happy to do that in their training and orientation process to help families look at whether fostering and or adopting is right for them.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and just the details that you've provided. And you know, it's such a hopeful topic and it's such a positive topic, but as you mentioned many times, like it doesn't happen without loss, and it doesn't happen without a lot of change over time, and change is hard for a lot of people. I mean, children the most, but so I'm always curious about learning more about this, and I thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you for your time and attention. Appreciate the opportunity.
One of the things that Kayla and Jamie are gracious, good community team players, and so they didn't lead with their frustration tonight. But since this team, the advisory board has spent a fair amount of time talking about and thinking about the consequence of our staffing shortage in ACDSS. And so one of the sort of domino impacts of having a staffing crisis in CPS is that other folks along the process who have skills and expertise are asked to do a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more to back up all of those folks in line, which means that a child with a safe and permanent plan is okay, right? As we shift our focus to the folks who are not okay, which means that those timelines get harder and harder to meet because they don't have time to dedicate to actually closing out these adoption cases. And so I appreciate that they are on the other end of that spectrum and have experienced the frustration and pain of not being able to meet those timelines because of that crisis all the way back upstream in CPS. And so our solutions in CPS actually help all of the folks down the line as well. So anyway, thank you to Janie and Kayla for being those good community team players and backing your colleagues up, and apologies for the frustration, but I hope relief is soon.
Thank you. So we, since we did that presentation first, I guess after that we should do the information items. Is that what you had in mind, Kaki?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so then Kayla and Janie, if you wanted to leave, you can, or you can hang out with us for the rest of the meeting. It's up to you. Thank you so much.
No pressure.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
So I hope we don't have a quorum, so we can't approve the minutes from the last meeting, but that's okay. We'll look at those next time. And then I hope, Emily, if you had a chance to review the information items, and I'll make sure that other members too, I'll just send a quick note to them and ask them to look over them. And could they email our questions if anybody has questions?
Sure.
Okay. Emily, did you have any questions about the information items?
Not right now, no.
And I had made only one note and now I can't find it. I'm sitting here scrolling through the document and I don't even see where I know I typed something, but it's not here. So that's not helpful.
Amy had asked me a question about the number of positions, you know, as we've been just talking about the fact that there's been some pain and suffering in terms of both feeling understaffed and then also having sort of rotating vacancy rates, because it's really hard for everybody to fill their vacancies. And so for example, the last CPS position that we posted, we only had 3 applicants, which is just shocking. And it's a pain that is being experienced by our colleagues at Region 10 and at the schools, and of course is happening across the country. And so I think we're all hoping that there's some relief around that coming soon, because all of those smart, qualified, competent candidates are doing something else right now. It's not clear what they're doing, but hopefully they'll need to come back to the workplace at some point soon, because we could sure use them. And we could sure use a vacancy, an applicant pool that includes people who are sort of brand new and eager and also unbroken. And then folks who have had some experience and have committed to the work, because you know that a new social worker, we're going to hurt them a little bit in our process. And so sometimes that's great. That means they're going to be a stronger, better social worker for us. And sometimes that means they're going to go work in finance after they've had their initial experience with us. And so we would like to have a little bit more roundness in the pools that we're getting. So in any case, I wanted to share with you that our budgets are due tomorrow, day after tomorrow, on Thursday. And so what that has meant is that we have asked all the managers to submit their requests and then justification for the requests. And so having an experience in the budget development of the city, that would include, for us in the city, a bulleted list of data. And here it's pages and pages of narrative and robust very persuasive arguments about why it is that new resources are needed. And so that was a little bit of a surprise for me because we got lots and lots of these requests. And so we ended up with a request for 8 staff in the child welfare division, 11 staff in benefits, and 2 in housing. So that's the number that now the leadership team considered all of those requests and then is asked to rank them with the assumption that the county is not able to say yes to all of those requests. And so we'll at some point have to, move the line down based on available revenue. And so they wanted to know what we thought was most important. And so we did that. And that is painful work because the needs are profound everywhere. In child welfare, it's pretty clear that we're unable with, and a lot of the units in the child welfare division were unable to meet our state standards and timeliness guidelines because we don't have sufficient staff to do the work. The acuity of the cases is so much greater. And in benefits, Wanda will tell you that we've had an increase of 62% in caseload in benefits over the last 3 years with 0 increase in the number of staff. And so, you can make a lot of good stuff happen with efficiency and, getting better at your job and developing good team, but, dynamics and all that stuff, but 62% is not something you can absorb. And at some point it just catches up to you. So, I think Wanda's already shared that there are staff in eligibility and benefits that have been able to take similar jobs in other jurisdictions without the burden of moving or commuting because everything is electronic and telecommuting now, and make $12,000 more for the same job working for a different locality. So the competitive field is also broader for us now in a way that hasn't been before. So we're suffering, and we're also asking the county to sort of acknowledge that suffering in a different kind of way. And I wanted to share some things that the county is doing in response to that. And obviously, this issue of workforce stabilization is not unique to the need for workforce stabilization is not unique to DSS. We feel it acutely, I think, because we feel that our obligations for community safety are so strong that any suffering in our staff really has suffering impact in the community, and we take that our charges very seriously around that. But it's also being experienced in other parts of the county. So that includes in the police department, in the fire department, in the community development department, Parks and Rec, all of them. And they're all having the same kinds of challenges. And so the county, I think, really heard this message resonate throughout the organization. And so has decided to focus on workforce stabilization. And you may have read in the paper that we had a much greater increase in the economic growth in the last quarter of fiscal year 21, 7% growth rate, which is just extraordinary. The previous 3 quarters at a 2.6% growth rate. And the last quarter of the previous year, we had a 0.6% growth rate. And so that 0.6% growth rate made the county contract in a big way, froze positions, got very, very conservative about the way it was going to use its available revenue, including CARES money and ARPA money, and really paying close attention to that. And so it's been in this really kind of panicked, contracted mode for a while. And the last quarter of fiscal year 21, that growth rate was substantially larger and appears to be sustaining, which gives the Board of Supervisors a fairly large amount of money as a surplus for fiscal year 21 to consider making mid-year changes. And so I know that Jefferson is making a series of proposals that the board will consider on its December 1st meeting. And he's already identified, and I believe he's already spoken with the board, all the Board of Supervisors members individually about doing something around a compensation, a mid-year compensation adjustment. We're not sure what that will look like, but that seems to be pretty high on his list. And then there's the possibility of asking for additional positions. And so there's been some hypothetical modeling going on about sort of if we had this amount, or if we could give you this amount, where would your priorities be? And it won't shock you to know that where our priorities would be around that. So we're hoping that we'll feel some relief, some midterm relief. We'll find out fairly shortly on what that will look like. And then, of course, our budget will go forward with the requests. So we've included all of our requests. We haven't held any back because we want the our county executive team to understand where we're feeling the pain. And then we'll see how many positions they'll allow us. And so I am, with my pathologically hopeful eyeballs, I'm anticipating some relief in mid-year, and then additional relief mid-year of fiscal of 22 as well, calendar year 22. Anyway, wanted you to know that because I do see that there's pathways towards some normalization for us ahead.
Is it your understanding that the money that's coming from this unprecedented economic growth, that the money that they're now saying, oh, well, we need to spend it because it's a big windfall, but are they considering that as if it's just a one-time money, or that this would be a longer term budget impact? Because I know in the past they've said that they didn't want to use temporary funds to add positions, because if next year that money's gone, then they're cutting positions. So how does that work?
To the extent that they are seeing this as, it's hard to predict in our current world. Predictions seem foolhardy in the moment, given our current context, but it does seem to be that it's sustaining. A fair amount of that economic growth was also about us changing real estate assessment, which will of course continue. So that money is not one time. So there's some amount that's tax revenue that comes in through other systems, which is about spending and participation from folks in our community that may waffle or wobble a little bit over time, but the vast majority is real estate assessments. And so they feel good about making some assumptions. I will say that also the Board of Supervisors approved Jeff Richardson's request to separate out the two HR departments. So we had one combined HR department for both schools and local government, and schools, just their personnel needs are so significant that they're always taxing the resources of HR. And they have impact on all of us in terms of even making recruitment decisions and those kinds of things. And so a new HR department dedicated to local government was approved several meetings ago. A new HR director, Mia Coltrane, has started. She's been here for just about 6 weeks. She's building out a new HR team for us as well. And the very first assignment she got from the county executive was to do a county-wide compensation study to see where we were in comparison to other jurisdictions. And so there's our budget request that will be hopefully reflected in fiscal year 23 budget, but also there should be another kind of series of adjustments based on whatever the compensation study reveals around where we should be that are part of that maybe we're in a better position to implement that because of this additional raised revenue. Fingers crossed.
Emily, did you want to ask anything or say anything about that?
No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you for that information.
I was thinking, you know, it came up in the school board meeting last week, this additional money that they then voted on and approved to give a $1,000 bonus to all full-time employees and also hourly employees down to, I think, 0.7. You know, but the conversation, it's not that it's not appreciated, it's just that is just a Band-Aid. And what we would have rather, what I think if they had asked us what we would have preferred, except beyond that, in addition to that, is for all these problems to be fixed and addressed. And that discussion didn't seem like it was being had. And so I hope that is the discussion that's being had, is not how can we make this temporarily better for our DSS department, but how can we address the systemic issues and the problems and the shortages and the, you know, because if they just throw $1,000 at you, but then the next day you're coming right back into the pressure cooker situation that your work life already is, it doesn't actually improve much. And then I think that the short-term solution is actually making things worse.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that is a concern for staff here. And also you've heard the lament and the angst in staff voices and in those updates every month. And so you've seen that the pain has been felt for some time. And so it's possible that this won't feel like a sufficient response to that and will feel too delayed to actually sort of manifest in any kind of gratitude or relief. So I'm not anticipating that whatever the format it shows up, whether it's a one-time thing or whether it's an increase or percentage increase. I suspect that they'll consider a percentage increase just to baseline salaries, just because they know this compensation study is coming later on. But it's hard to be sure of that. And in any case, I mentioned three layers of relief. And for us, because the deficits are so great, it would take all three layers to feel that relief. Any one of these things by themselves will improve circumstances a little bit, but it's not going to solve the right sizing problem that we started with. So I'm hopeful that the conversation is motivated by some guts.
Yep, I like guts.
Yeah.
So, I don't know the timeline. I mean, you're turning it into budget on Thursday, but then how quickly will this turn around and onto a vote, or how quickly could this have an impact for your department?
I don't know, Mary, maybe you can weigh in here. I know that we'll have a conversation with the Finance and Budget Office sometime in December, in which they'll say how they're responding to our budget. And then whatever that is gets rolled into the budget book that then gets part of the county executive's budget, and then it gets debated and massaged over a couple of meetings and then adopted maybe in April. Is that generally right, Mary?
Yes, that's generally correct. Yes.
So, I mean, there's opportunities between now and then to change whatever the details are in there. The cost of those changes over time.
So I guess in our message out, if you could include a little bit of what would be a good way for us to frame how we should speak with the Board of Supervisors about that, how we can best advocate to try to pressure in the best way possible, and use all of our influence in the best way possible to help get you what you need. I think that's mainly just what we need to know. And you do such a good job of that. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll do that, and we'll get it out. We'll try to have the time even again, so that it's sooner to certainly before the December 1st meeting, so that when their decision.
Well, I'm looking at the agenda. I don't think we have anything else. I don't have any business from the board. Emily, did you have anything you wanted to bring to our attention?
No, not today. Thank you.
Okay.
It does look like we'll probably have 2 new board members sometime at the beginning of the year. And so at that point, Emily, you will join the 2 new board members to do some formal orientation with Virginia Department of Social Services and also with us. And so I just didn't want you to think that we were neglecting you, but waiting until you have a cohort, and then we'll just drown you in information.
I think that would be really helpful. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Drowning described as helpful. Perfect.
Exactly. She's definitely already one of us. She's a social worker.
Well, that sounds great. Is there anything else we're supposed to do? Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for this meeting, and I hope we can get a couple more of us here next month. But I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and I think this was a really informative time. So yeah, Lisa, if we could just be sure to send the link to the recording of this meeting to our other board members to give them a chance to watch it and learn all the things that we learned today, then I think that would be really helpful. And then otherwise, I guess we'll see you all in December.
Great. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.